I'm Evelyn Mitchell, 78 years old, and for 3 years I watched my son's new wife, Rachel, systematically isolate him from our family while draining his bank accounts. She convinced him I was too old and senile to manage my own affairs, tried to get power of attorney over my estate, and even attempted to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could access my $3 million trust fund. Rachel thought she was dealing with a confused elderly woman. She had no idea I was a retired federal prosecutor who'd spent 35 years destroying criminals in court. This is how I exposed her entire scheme and sent her to prison for elder exploitation. Subscribe now. Hit that notification bell for more revenge stories. My name is Evelyn Mitchell, and at 78 years old, I've seen enough in my life to recognize a predator when I see one. My son David married Rachel 4 years ago, when he was 52 and she was 31. From day one, I knew something was wrong with her, but David was blinded by love after his painful divorce. Rachel was beautiful, charming, and knew exactly what to say to make David feel young again. Within months of their wedding, she convinced him to move 2 hours away from me. Then she started limiting my phone calls with him. "Your mother stresses David out with her constant worrying," she'd tell me. "He needs space to focus on our marriage." The isolation got worse. Family dinners stopped. Holiday visits were canceled. When I did see David, Rachel was always there, controlling every conversation. My son, who used to call me every Sunday without fail, now barely contacted me twice a month. But the real alarm bells went off when Rachel showed up at my door with papers for me to sign. "Mom, David and I are worried about you living alone at your age. We think it's time you gave me power of attorney so I can help manage your finances and healthcare decisions. I'm 78, not senile. I live independently, manage my own investments, volunteer at the library twice a week, and have sharper mental faculties than most people half my age." I knew exactly what Rachel was doing. She wanted access to my $3 million trust fund that would eventually go to David. "Rachel, I don't need help managing my affairs. I'm perfectly capable." Her smile turned cold. "David says you've been forgetting things, making poor decisions. We're just trying to protect you before something bad happens." I refused to sign anything. 2 weeks later, Rachel filed a petition with the court claiming I was mentally incompetent and needed a guardian appointed, specifically her. She submitted fabricated evidence including fake medical records claiming I had dementia, forged statements from neighbors saying I was confused and wandering, and manipulated photos that allegedly showed my home in dangerous disrepair. The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. Rachel's lawyer presented their case to the judge, painting me as a declining elderly woman who couldn't care for herself. They claimed David was too emotionally attached to recognize my deterioration, so Rachel had to step in. What Rachel didn't know was that before I retired at 65, I was a federal prosecutor for 35 years. I'd successfully prosecuted over 200 cases including fraud, embezzlement, and organized crime. I knew exactly how courtrooms worked, and I knew how to destroy someone's credibility on the witness stand. I hired Margaret Chen, one of the best elder law attorneys in the state. "Margaret, my daughter-in-law is trying to steal my estate by having me declared incompetent. Everything she submitted is fabricated." Margaret reviewed the documents Rachel had filed. "Evelyn, these medical records are definitely fake. This doctor whose name is on them retired 7 years ago and never treated you. We can prove fraud." I also hired a private investigator named Frank Delgado to dig into Rachel's background. What he found was explosive. Rachel's real name was Rachel Morrison, and she had a criminal history under that name: multiple fraud charges, identity theft, and one conviction for elder exploitation in another state 5 years ago. She'd scammed an elderly man out of $200,000 by marrying him, isolating him, and draining his accounts before disappearing. Rachel had changed her name legally after serving 18 months in prison, then moved to our state and reinvented herself. She'd targeted my son specifically because she'd researched our family and knew about my substantial trust fund. The evidence Frank uncovered was damning. Rachel had done this before. She was a career con artist who specialized in exploiting families with elderly members and money. At the competency hearing, Rachel's lawyer went first. "Your Honor, Mrs. Mitchell is clearly in cognitive decline. Our evidence shows she can't manage her own affairs safely." Then it was my turn. Margaret stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to call Mrs. Evelyn Mitchell to testify. I walked confidently to the witness stand. The judge looked at me carefully. I didn't look like someone in cognitive decline. I was sharp, well-dressed, and completely composed. Mrs. Mitchell, Margaret began, what did you do for a living? I was a federal prosecutor for 35 years. I tried over 200 cases and maintained a 92% conviction rate. The judge's eyebrows went up. Rachel's confident smile started to crack. And are you experiencing any cognitive decline? No, I manage my own investments, which have grown 8% this year. I volunteer regularly, I read extensively. My doctor confirms I'm in excellent mental health. Margaret then presented our evidence. Your Honor, the medical records submitted by Rachel Mitchell are forgeries. This doctor never treated Mrs. Mitchell and has been retired since 2017. The neighbors' statements are fabricated. We have affidavits from those neighbors stating they never said Mrs. Mitchell was confused, and the photos of her supposedly dangerous home were taken at a different property entirely. The courtroom went silent. Rachel's face went pale. Furthermore, Margaret continued, we have evidence that Rachel Mitchell is actually Rachel Morrison, a convicted felon who served 18 months for elder exploitation in Nevada. She changed her name legally after release and has now targeted the Mitchell family using the exact same playbook. Marry into a wealthy family, isolate the son, then try to access the elderly mother's assets through guardianship fraud. I watched Rachel's lawyer frantically whisper to her. She shook her head violently, but the evidence was overwhelming. Your Honor, we're requesting that Rachel Mitchell be investigated for fraud, forgery of legal documents, and attempted elder exploitation. The judge looked at Rachel with disgust. Mrs. Morrison, or should I say Mrs. Mitchell, these are serious allegations. I'm denying your guardianship petition immediately and referring this case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Rachel tried to run. She literally stood up and tried to leave the courtroom. The bailiff stopped her at the door. Within days, Rachel was arrested and charged with attempted elder exploitation, fraud, forgery, and identity fraud related to her name change and hidden criminal history. The district attorney also discovered she'd already stolen $60,000 from David's accounts during their marriage. David was devastated. Mom, I had no idea. She seemed so genuine. I'm so sorry. David, she's a professional con artist. She's done this before. We need to focus on protecting you now. Rachel's trial happened 8 months later. I testified about her scheme to have me declared incompetent to access my trust fund. David testified about the financial manipulation and isolation. The prosecutor from Nevada testified about her prior conviction for the same type of scheme. The jury convicted Rachel on all charges. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in state prison, the maximum allowed under the sentencing guidelines for repeat elder exploitation offenders. Ms. Morrison, the judge said, you are a predator who targets elderly people and their families. You've done this before and would have done it again if not caught. You are a danger to vulnerable people. Rachel screamed at me as they led her away. You ruined everything. You're just a bitter old woman. I looked at her calmly. I'm a federal prosecutor who spent 35 years putting criminals in prison. You picked the wrong family. David divorced Rachel immediately. He moved back to town and we rebuilt our relationship. He apologized for letting Rachel isolate us and promised never to let anyone come between our family again. I'm now 80 years old, still living independently, still managing my own affairs, and still volunteering at the library. Rachel will be eligible for parole when she's 43, and I plan to attend every parole hearing to ensure she serves her full sentence. People sometimes ask if I feel bad about sending my son's wife to prison. The answer is no. Rachel was a career criminal who targeted our family to steal my assets. She would have succeeded if I hadn't recognized the con and used my legal experience to destroy her scheme. Age doesn't make you vulnerable if you have knowledge and experience. I'm 80 years old, and I have 35 years of courtroom victories behind me. Rachel learned that the hard way. She thought she was dealing with a confused elderly widow. She was actually dealing with a former federal prosecutor who knew exactly how to dismantle her fraud and send her to prison. Never underestimate the old woman with a legal background. We know all the tricks because we've seen them all before. The end.